Hello, how are we all today? Okay, so today I'm going to do a little bit of a wire work project with you. Now, these can be made into earrings, so all you will need to do is just repeat the same process. If you want it to be a mirror image, I'll talk you through the difference in when we get to that step. So it's just a case of bending your wire in the opposite direction and then following exactly the same step. You'll just curve the wire around. I have done two to show you as an example. So when we put you down on the mat, I'll show you what they look like. And I haven't done the mirror image. I've kept them the same and I think they look nice. So you can make these into little pendants. You can have them as earrings. You can do whatever you like with them. I'm going to be using the 0.8mm wire. You could go up a gauge if you wanted to use 1mm instead, but you've got the 0.8 in your kit, and that for me is my go-to. It's for me the perfect size. You could also go down a gauge if you wanted to and use a 0.7, but I think the 0.8 is sturdy enough and easy enough to kind of create those shapes with. As for the weaving wire, I'm going to use a 0.4. Again, that's in your kit, but if you wanted to, you could use a 0.3 as well. And as for the beads, I'm going to use one size 8mm bead. I'm going to use a 6mm bead, and I'm going to use 3 little bicones, but you can change that up. So if you wanted to use a large bead, you would just need to create more of those weave repetitions as we guide that around. But what I will do is I'm going to leave my weaving wire, my 0.4, on my spool, and that way if I need to add a little bit more onto it, I can do, and that's no problem. So shall we get going? If you want to go down to my hands then, and let's check that you can see okay before we start, and check that I'm in the center. I could do with moving that a little bit like that. Is that okay? Okay, so I'm going to start with my 0.8mm weaving wire, and I'm going to cut 2 lengths of this at 6.5 inches, which is about 17 centimeters. So this is what we're going to create. As I say, you can add them onto the earring hooks in your kit, and you can make little earrings with them. Or if you wanted to, you could pop a little jump ring on it and you could make it into a pendant. So as I say, we've got the larger bead at the bottom and a smaller at the top. You can change that up. You don't have to use those little crystal bicones if you don't want to, or you could swap them out for, again, another smaller pearl or whatever it is that you like the look of in your kit. So I would say this is probably an intermediate make. It's not too difficult. So I'm just going to straighten out my wire. Now, if you've got nylon coated pliers, they're great. You can just straighten it out like that, or you can just straighten it out with your fingers. I always like to straighten my wire first, because when it's been on the spool, it will have a natural curve in it. As you can see already, it's got a little bit of a bend. But I think if you can start straightening your wire to begin with, then that will create a neater finish. So I'm going to cut 2 lengths at 6.5 inches. I will try and say whatever the inches are, I'll give that in centimeters as well. I do tend to like swap and change what kind of measurement I use. So this is going to be 1 length at 6.5, a little bit over, and I'm going to cut another the same. And I'll probably just straighten out my wire again, but don't worry too much if it does get a little bit of a bend or a curve in it. Okay, so that is all we need of our 0.8mm wire. Now I'm going to start my weave about 2.5 inches in from the right hand side, which is again about 6.5 centimeters. So I'm going to take my 0.4, I'm going to keep it on the reel, and that way if I kind of need a little bit more as I go, that's not a problem. I'm just going to trim off the end of my 0.4 wire, just where we've got that little bend where it's been hooked onto my reel. So I'll tuck this end out of the way. So as I say, I'm going to start about 2.5 inches, which is about 6.5 centimeters up from the right end. So round about here. And I'm going to take my weaving wire and I'm just going to slide that through the middle. You can hold one wire first if that's easier. So if you just want to take the first wire, which will be at the bottom, I'm going to keep hold of a little tail end, just while I wrap this on. So to secure that weaving wire, I'm going to wrap it round 3 times. Now each coil I'm making is going to sit next to the one before. I'm not wrapping over each one, just one next to the other. I can pull that down tight. Now, if you need to at any point, take a pair of pliers and just compress that weave, and that's going to make it neater. I'm going to take my top wire and I'm going to position that above. Again, still working in, so I'm 2.5 inches there or thereabouts from the end. I'm then going to take the weaving wire and I'm going to bring that over the top of both of them. Again, so it's sitting next to those 3 little loops that I've created. And I'm just going to create a little weaving pattern. Now you can do whatever weave that you're comfortable with. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to show you this one, which I quite like. And we're just going to keep repeating that to about 5 centimeters or 2 inches, pretty much for the rest of this space here. I'm going to leave a tiny bit at the end. So this should fill the size of your larger bead when we wrap that round. It will go all the way around and around the top one. However, if you're using larger beads, all you would need to do is start a little bit further back. So instead of 2.5 inches in, you might want to start 3 inches in. So you might need to adjust that to whatever you're using. So I've got 3 wraps securing the bottom, 1 wrap which is going over both, and I'm going to bring that weaving wire through the middle, up just around the top one, and then once just around the bottom one. And as I say, occasionally I'm just going to come in with my pliers and push that in to make it nice and neat. And that's our repetition over them both. If it's easy for you, you can just splay the ends out a little bit, just so you can get that weaving wire up through the middle, over the top, underneath, to just go over the bottom, so it's coming back through the middle. Over the top of both wires, through the middle of the wires, over the top wire, round the bottom, and back through the middle. Every now and again, just come in to compress that weave down. So it's starting to look, I can move my tools out the way for a second to show you. Like this. Get a little bit of focus. Because that bead's there. There you go. So we're going over the top, in between, over the top wire, and just over the bottom wire. And just keep repeating that pattern. So we are going to weave for quite a little distance on this. As I say, probably for about 5 centimeters, but I will keep a little bit of that tail end on at the end. And then if I need to do a little bit more, I can do, and I can just adjust it as I go. So really straightforward. Once you get the hang of it, you'll get into a nice kind of rhythm of wrapping over both wires, just the top one, and then just the bottom one, over them both, over the top, and over the bottom. So in terms of how to create a neat weave, all it is really is just practice and getting used to the tension on how you hold your wire. So I'm not putting too much pressure on it. It's wire, so it's got memory in it. So I'm placing it where I want it to be before I bring that round. I'm not pulling it too tight. But these wires are going to run parallel, just next to each other and fairly straight. So each time I do a little repetition, I'm just going to come in with my pliers. Any pliers will do. You don't need any fancy needle nose ones or anything like that. And this wire is also got a protective kind of coating on it. So you're not going to mar your wire. You're not going to leave tool marks on it too easily. And your colour is going to kind of remain on that. So of course, all wire will tarnish over a long period of time. It's just a case of looking after your jewellery. So I would always advise, if you are making to sell or to gift, maybe pop in and include into your jewellery make some little care instructions. So I would always say, obviously, take all your jewellery off before you go swimming, or you take a bath or a shower or anything like that. You don't want to get it wet if you can help it. If you do need to clean it, a little jewellery polishing cloth just to rub over will usually do the trick. And obviously everybody reacts differently to different metals depending on chemicals in your body. So whether you might be on different medications, different hormones that you give off, sweat in general, perfumes, lotions, creams, things like that. I always say to people, make sure your jewellery is the last thing you put on and the first thing you take off when you're getting ready and changed and things like that. So again, I'm just keeping that little repetition going. I did do one here's one I made earlier just in case for time, but it doesn't take very long at all. I'm just continuing that weave. So each time I do a little repetition, I'm making sure that wire is sitting next to the wire that I've just wrapped. They're not lapping over each other. They're not sitting on top of each other. They're just sitting next to each other. And you can see as I bring that wire through the middle, whatever position I want to put it in, I just take my finger and I give it a little push down. It shouldn't be too strenuous on your hands. I tend to find if I ever get the wire if I've been making an awful lot of wire wrap stuff, the position on my hand that tends to get maybe a little bit sore is this part here, and that's where I'm pulling the wire down there. If that's the case, you can always pop a little plaster on your finger just to prevent that happening. But we're not doing that much weaving on these earrings or pendant. So you should be okay. Again, every now and again, just going to give it a little push down. You can also go over that with your nylon coated pliers.
Natalie,
yeah.
Sorry, lovely. Can you just like sort of slow down the pattern, because even I'm looking at and you're weaving it so fast that can you just sort of show the pattern again? Just sort of slow it down a little bit.
Yeah. So it's starting to make this lovely, lovely shape. And all I'm doing is I've just wrapped once over both of them. Move that reel out the way. Well, that gives me a little bit more focus. The wire is coming up between the two. So again, if you need to splay these out, just to get that wire in between, it's going in between the middle one, over the top, under the bottom, to go back through the middle. Give it a little push down just to compress. So the wire's wrapping over both of the wires in the middle, over the top one, and just over that bottom wire. Over them both, up through the middle, over the top, and over the bottom one to come back through the middle. Sorry, I get in such a kind of repetition with it. This is why I find wire work for me personally really like therapeutic, because I just kind of get lost in the the moving of it. But I appreciate I am going a little bit fast. Over the top, under the middle, to wrap over the top wire, over the bottom wire, to come back through the middle. I'm just coming up and in between the middle of the wires each time. I either take it from the bottom and bring it over both of them, or I'm coming in between to either wrap the top one, so the wire is now coming back out the bottom, so it can just wrap that bottom wire. So to do that, I'm going back in between. So compressing that weave by just giving it a little push together is just going to make sure that that weave is sitting nice and neatly. And when you flip it over, it should look fairly straight and nice on one side and on the other side too. So that's the back of it, and that's the front. So whichever way you want to put it. I always tend to have a little look after I've done what I need to and just see which looks the neatest. So I'm coming over them both, once around the top and then once around the bottom wire. Over the top to wrap both of them, up through the middle, top wire, bottom wire. And don't worry if this is starting to get a little bit wobbly or these at the bottom are curving. I obviously keep this in my hand, so it does tend to curve. Also, if you want to, just so that's not scratching on your hand, you can cut this little tail end off at any point. So as soon as you've secured that wire on, or halfway through, or at the end, whatever you want to do. So if I'm needing to cut that off, I'm just going to splay those two wires out a little bit. So I've got this little tail end, and keeping this end on where I'm still weaving attached to my reel, but this bit here where I've just secured it on, I'm just going to trim it off, and I'm trimming it off close to the wire, these kind of base wires, which are my 0.8, and I'm just going to tuck in that tiny little part of that 0.4, because I don't want anything to be scratching or catching on any clothes. So you can see now where I've trimmed off where we've started, just by putting a little bit of pressure with my tools, push that into the wire. So I'm going to keep going just a little bit more over both, between the two, over the top one, and then over the bottom one. So these wires should still be running fairly straight and parallel. If you need to, just splay them out a little bit at the bottom, so you've got space to bring that wire in between. And take your time with this. Obviously, I'm quite used to working with it, so you know, I know what kind of tension I want on it. If you're new to wire work, or it's something that I'm still perfecting it as well, but just take your time with it. The slower you go, the neater you will be. I'm just bringing that wire around. Just going to splay them out a little bit more in between to wrap the top just over the bottom. I'm just going to see now how long I've wrapped for. So I'm wanting it to be about 5 centimeters, which is about 2 inches. I can go a little bit over if I need to. I can always take some off. So I'm going to keep going. I want to practically almost reach the very end of that. And that should be enough to wrap around my beads. So I'm still going over both, just the top wire and then just the bottom wire. Is this clear? I'm hoping people can see okay. Just having a little look in the comments because I don't want to have missed anything or if I need to answer any questions. So Vicky says she's struggling a little bit. I'm so sorry I've gone so fast there. I will try my very best to kind of slow that right down again for you. So I'm taking my wire and I'm wrapping it over both of the base wires. That's then coming up through the middle. And then it wraps over the top wire. And then back up to go back through between them, which then wraps the bottom wire. And it is just the same repetition over and over and over and over and over and over again. Over them both, between the two, over the top, up, back through the middle. Again, just keep splaying those wires out if you need to get in between them. I'm going to see how far this weave is now. Okay, so I've got about 5.5 centimeters there. That's fine. I'd rather have a little bit over. As I say, I'm still going to leave this weaving wire attached just for now. And then I'm going to just give this a little straighten up again. So again, you can do that with your pliers or you can do it with your fingers. You can just straighten out this. It will always go a little bit wobbly. But this is the look that we should have created by doing that weave. So you can see the wire is going over the top of both, over one and then over the other. So it's kind of creating maybe like little kisses. Don't worry if you have at any point wrapped the top and the bottom a couple of times or wrapped over both. It really doesn't matter. All that you're going to be doing here is just creating a frame to go around your beads. So it really doesn't matter if you've missed a step or you're doing your own weave. What is the wonderful thing about wire work is it's always going to be unique and different. I can't remember who it was, but once upon a time, someone said it was a happy accident. There is a lovely Irish saying as well, which is that when they used to do, I think it was like crochet, they used to work in a deliberate mistake. And they used to believe that like their soul or something would get trapped in whatever they were making. So they would work in a deliberate mistake to allow that to release. So it makes everything unique and yours. So you probably will say, oh, I've done that. Other people won't. But again, it's your original stamp on it. But if you've done a slightly different repetition or you've made a mistake, don't worry. You can always untangle that as well by unwrapping it. Anything made by hand can be undone by hand. So you can always unwrap it, but your wire will kind of curl a little bit. So if you need to, you can just straighten that out with your nylon pliers gently. So I've now got this. So I've got my 2 long ends and then my weave at the bottom. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bend one of my long ends. So if you want to make mirror image, you could bend the left one down, and then on the other E-ring, you could bend the right one down. It really doesn't matter. If you're making a pendant, just choose one. For me, I've done them both the same. So I'm going to bring out one of the longer wires at the end where I started into a kind of 90-degree bend. And I'm going to take my larger bead and I'm going to place my bead up next to my weave. So it is on the bent wire, which is sticking out of the top. And then once I've got this stage, I'm going to bend this wire around the bead. So I'm bringing it down in the direction of the weave, all the way round. So I'm going to hold it quite close. If you want to have your weave this way round on this side, then I'm going to bring that wire behind it. If the other side is the side you prefer, then bring that wire above. All I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over for now, just so I can show you. So that wire is going to coil all around the bead. I'm going to bring it so where it comes out of the bead here, it's going to sit on top. And I'm going to bring it round again. So it's going all the way round. So it's fitting snugly around. And then going to come in with my cutters and I'm going to trim. So I'm going to leave a tiny little bit, maybe half a centimetre, a couple of millimetres, and I'm going to cut that end off. And then what I'm going to do with my pliers, where this little end is, you can either tuck it back into the hole in that bead, or you can just bend it over and push it together. I'm going to use my other pliers just so you know you don't need any fancy ones. So I'm just putting a bend in that wire that we've cut and I'm going to push it together flush. So I've got this kind of little flat loop and I've done that just so I've tucked any of the sharp edge out of the way. You're not going to see this because this weave is going to come over it now. So I've now at this stage, so I've put my bead on my bent wire, wrapped that wire around the bead, cut it off and tucked the end in. And then where I have my gorgeous weave, I'm going to start to bring that also around the bead. Now I'm going to do this slowly because what happens is it always kind of wants to turn in a little bit, and that's okay. But all I'm going to do is just with my pliers every now and again, just push that flat. What I'm going to do with this part is I'm just going to move it up slightly out the way so I can start to bring that weave. So I'm going to hold my bead in between my finger and my thumb. And I'm going to curve my weave gradually around the bead until it crosses that wire. Again, if I need to, with my pliers, I'm just going to give it a little flatten, just so that weave is facing upwards rather than kind of bending in. So if I show you on this one, you can see the weave has started to kind of curl around the bead, and that's fine. If you like that, that looks lovely too. But I've just flattened it out so it's sitting facing upright. It's gone awfully dark in my room all of a sudden. I hope you're okay to see. Okay, so with the wire that is still long that we've left, I'm going to bend that up again into kind of a 90-degree angle, so it's sitting upright like this. So if I turn it to the back, it's looking like that at the moment. And my front is looking like this. And then I'm going to add on my smaller bead. So I've got a 6mm bead here, but again, you can use what you want. If you've got a smaller one, then you'll probably need less weave. If you've got a bigger one, you'll probably need slightly longer. So I'm just going to position that upright so that bead sits above the other one. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm just going to come in with my tools and make that bend a little bit sharper. And again, just give that a little push out. I'm now going to take this part of my weave. I've still got my wire attached just in case I need to add any extra onto it. And I'm going to hold this bottom bead and the weave that goes across between my finger and my thumb, and try and hold on to that top bead too. Now this is still going to move, and that's absolutely fine. I just want to kind of hold it in position at the moment, so when I start to bring this wire back round, I know kind of whereabout I need to bend it. So you can see as I'm pulling that weave back, it's curling in on itself. I'm just going to come in with my pliers, keep giving it a little push outwards, just to reposition to make it flat. Bringing it round, all the way around that bead. Keep repositioning it. So you can see, as I bring that round, if I'm bringing it around the back, it should fit that bead, but I've got a tiny little bit of space there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull them back up, and just because I've left that wire on, that weaving wire, I can just add a couple more repetitions if I need to. So I'm still going over the top of both of the wires, between them to wrap the top one, and then just to wrap the bottom one. So I'm just going to add on a couple of extra repetitions of that same weave we've been doing, just to fill any of that space. Guiding that wire around that top bead. Okay. So I want to bring this weave around the back. So I'm going to keep bringing it around. So it goes right around that top bead. Just pushing it in with my fingers. So it looks like this at the back. And it's looking like a little figure of 8 at the front. Again, if I need to, just push it out with my pliers so it's framing those beads nicely. Now I'm going to cut my tail end off now because I've finished with my weave. If you want to, you can cut, leave in maybe a couple of inches, and you can either trim it off there and then, or you can use this tail end to just wrap around that main wire in the middle if you want to make it extra secure. If you're doing that, I'm just going to bend it up, and where I've got that little bit of space, just bringing that wire through, giving it a nice tight pull. So I've secured that onto my frame. And then going to come in close again with my cutters, trim off that weaving wire. If there's anything sticking up, just check it with my finger. And then I'm going to secure those little tiny bits into the back of my frame. So if you want to, you can bring them frontwards and you can just secure them on there, or you can just tuck it into the back. So we've not really got a lot of room, but I tend to find that if I just bring my wire in, give it a little bend and a little squish, it should just tuck nicely into the frame. Little push down, bend that over. I'm hoping you can see okay. Again, the sun shines out in force. Now you can use any pliers you want to do this. I have got a pair of bent nose, which I find really, really useful because they help you get in small little spaces. But if you've got some tweezer nose or anything like that, that's fine. I'm just being gentle with it. I don't want to distort the front of my frame. And again, it's still going to move, that's fine. I'm just going to keep coming in with my pliers and just bringing that weave back out. So now it's looking like a little figure of 8. You just keep repositioning it as you want to. Flatten that down. So my wires at the back should be fairly tucked in, out the way. If you've got a little bit more length, you can wrap it right underneath here, but they're not going to catch on anything now, and I've created that weave that's running around both of the beads. So I've got this lovely big wire which is coming out the top that I can do whatever I want with now. So I'm going to make this into a pendant or an earring, and I'm going to create a little part here at the top. So I'm going to add on, you don't have to add on any extra beads. I'm going to add on 3 of these lovely little bicone crystals. So I'm just sliding them on to that top wire. And I want that to go right down so that top crystal is sitting on that top bead. So it's going to be slightly hidden with the frame. So you'll probably only be able to see 2 of the crystals out of the top. And then I'm going to create a little wrapped loop. So I'm going to take my bail making pliers, but you can use some round nose pliers if you've got them. And I'm going to position my pliers just above that top crystal. Now, to create the space to make the wrapped loop, I'm using on my bail step pliers the bottom 2 little ones because I don't want my loop to be too big. And I'm going to give that a little bit of a bend, 90 degrees. So when I remove my pliers, I've got that little bit of space above that crystal. So I've bent my wire over the top, and then going to reposition my pliers by just moving my hand. So I've now got that smaller loop at the top, and I'm going to bring my wire all the way over. Again, I'm going to reposition my hand so they're back in the position where I've got that little bit of space at the bottom, and I'm going to bring that wire up and over, and then just tilt it if I need to into position. So that's now running at the top like that. Oh, sunshine, you've not been here for weeks and now you can't see what I'm doing. So I'm now taking this wire and I'm going to wrap 3 little wraps, or as many as it takes, just to fill that space between the top crystal and my loop. I'm going to leave my round nose or my bail making pliers in at the moment, just to make sure that I'm not distorting that loop. And this wire is lovely and soft. I can use my fingers to do this, but if you want to use your tools, you can do. If I'm using my tools, I'm just going to take it round once. I'm going to bring it round the bottom, and then I'm just going to keep doing that. So it's like a half turn. And I'm just going to fill that space. So I'll probably make about 3 wraps in between, just so I've filled the space. I can take that round nose or bail step plier out now. So you can see I've made those little wraps between the loop and those lovely crystals. What I am going to do is, because I've used my tools, I'm just going to get that bend out of my wire. So I'm just going to give it a little straighten out again. Now what you can do is you can just trim off and tuck in, but I quite like to make a little bit of a feature with these crystals at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to bring that wire around the crystals. So if you want to, you can take your pliers and you can hold that little wrapped loop at the top in place as you just bring that wire around the crystals. So I'm going in between and over them. So where I've got those 2 crystals in between, the wire is going to come over and it's just going to wrap. So I've kind of wrapped around my wire. Again, it will kind of twist and move, and that's okay. All the way around. So I've wrapped that wire around my crystals at the top. And then I'm going to bring it around the back. And I'm going to trim it off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to trim it off at the front. I don't want to trim it off at the back because I don't want it to kind of catch or go in my hair. And if I can trim it off here, then it's going to be protected by that little weave that we've done. So in with my cutters, trim it off, and then just give it a little flatten down. If you need to get in the space, you can bend this back just to make sure you're tucking that in flat. So you can see now that's tucked in flat against that crystal. And then I can just reposition that back. And if your loop has slightly moved like mine has, that's not a problem. Just going to give it a little twist back into position. And my pendant is done. So if I'm making it into a pendant, I'll probably put, I'm so sorry about the light, it's just got a whole lot worse. I'm going to pop a little jump ring on. If I want to make it into an earring, then I'm just going to attach it onto my earring hook. Where have I put my lovely earring hook? There we go. So I'm going to get my findings kit out again. What's lovely is whichever colourway you've chosen for the kit, everything will be matching. So your wire will match your earring hooks and your findings and things like that. I'm going to then just open it up by giving it a little tilt towards me, and then I can attach that directly to the loop at the top. And then my earring, when worn, is going to sit forward. So if I repeat that process, I've then got a lovely matching pair of earrings. I can hold them up so you can see. And if I want to make an extra one, I can pop a little jump ring through that and then attach that to a chain as well. Or you can make, you know, a larger loop if you wanted to, or use a larger jump ring and you can add that onto a beaded necklace as well. So that is my set. I appreciate I've gone quite quickly, but I always want to make sure whatever I do, I can do it within the hour. And obviously you can watch this back at any point. So just follow along at your own pace and take your time with it. As I say, the slower you go with the weave, the neater it will be. And, you know, nothing's ever perfectly symmetrical, I don't think anyway, but they're They're there or thereabouts. They're definitely a matching pair. They might not be identical. Maybe more sisters than twins. I hope you liked it. I'm going to put them in. If you want to bring me back up, Kitty, I'll show you what they look like when they're worn.
Has anybody got any questions?
Yeah,
They're
me.
beautiful.
Thank
you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was a bit late in, so I didn't know what length of wire you used.
Okay. Obviously, depending on the size of the beads that you're using, you might want to adjust your repetition of the weave. So I've gone for 2 lengths of the 0.8 millimeter wire, which is our base wires, and I've cut that for 6.5 inches, which is about 17 centimeters. Then I've started the weave in from the right hand side at about 2.5 inches in, which is about 6.5 centimeters. So I've weaved that full 2.5 inches from the end, and that should be enough to go around both of the beads.
They're
Obviously,
very
if you're using
pretty.
smaller beads, you won't need as much of that weave repetition. If you're making larger, I would move back a little bit further. So instead of starting your weave 2.5 inches in from the right, I might start 3 inches in. You're still going to have plenty to play with at the top of those wires.
Yeah, it looks very pretty, Natalie.
Thank you.
Very
there-
pretty.
Sorry. So will there be a PDF for this one?
There won't be, no, but you can watch the video back as many times as you want when Kitty sends it to you. And if you've got any questions at all, please drop me an email as well. I'm always on Facebook or in the handmade group, or you can send me the email and I'll always talk you through it again. It is just the repetition with it, really. And if yours come out slightly different, then that's even better. You've got something a bit more unique. It's your own design then. But they're really comfortable to wear as well. They're not at all heavy. And they're dangly. Vicky's asking, what is the handmade group? Lucy, would you be able to drop the link in the comments, the handmade group on Facebook for us, please, so Vicky can access it? It's a wonderful group where we all come together and we all share our makes and show off. And if anyone's got any questions or needs any help with anything, then the group's fab. No one's, we only offer constructive criticism if it's asked for. Usually it's just people going, oh my gosh, that's gorgeous, and what colour beads did you get there, and where's that on the Totally Beads website, and people share the links for things. So do come and find us in the handmade group. It's one big lovely happy family.
Thanks.